Welcome to this episode of the Teacher Transition Podcast. In this episode, we have Felicia Greenberg with us. Felicia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So glad you're with us. Felicia is a former teacher who is a slave to the bell schedule and now works as an instructional designer from the comfort of her home office. When she's not home, you can catch her up in the air traveling somewhere. Felicia, so excited to have you share your story and your work experience and everything from the classroom and beyond.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm excited. I know when I was contemplating transferring out of the teacher world, there was really nothing out there for me to look at and look towards for motivation and inspiration. And so I'm excited that I'll be a part of that for somebody else going through what I've gone through.
I know they're going to appreciate it. It really can feel like such a lonely process. I felt like so alone in my experience, and and I didn't feel like there was a safe place. Like the faculty room wasn't the place to talk about this.
Yeah, and even though when you're a teacher, there's a lot of, at least in my experience, and I taught in 3 different schools for 9 years total. So I feel like in 3 different states. So I feel like I've gotten a good survey of teachers out there. Even though there are other unhappy teachers that you might work with, like talking to them in the lunchroom or the faculty room, there's a difference between talking about wanting to leave and actually putting into motion leaving. And so, I think I was able to talk to some of my coworkers about wanting to leave, but when I was actually starting to put it in motion and even just making a resume, they were like, suddenly they weren't a part of the conversation. It was for them more just venting about the stress of it. And so it was a little rough for sure. Plus you kind of think, hey, am I crazy? I'm leaving this stable job where I have great vacations. I had a pension plan coming to me and, all these things. And you're like, wait, am I crazy to actually think about doing this? And, now I tell myself I'm probably crazy for thinking for so many years I wanted to change and not doing it the first or second time I thought about it.
Well said. I remember feeling a little bit like a rebel and like, yeah, no one else is doing this. I love the distinction you made of, between those that are venting about challenges and those that are actually generating energy, like they're doing something about it. So awesome distinction.
Yeah, no, and I have, even since then, I have a lot of Facebook friends, who are my former colleagues, and they're still talking about wanting to leave teaching, and I've now been out of the classroom for 5 years, and so I just think, wow, you can only talk about it for so long before I think opportunities do start to slip away from you. So it's just, I think, I'll give a tip at the very beginning, which is if you're thinking about it, it's worth exploring. Despite the fear, for
Awesome.
sure.
So good. Will you take us
Yeah,
on a timeline, like take us back in
yeah,
time? Where do you
yeah,
teach? What did you teach? Yeah. How long did you
sure.
teach? Anything like that?
So I'll take you to the very beginning, which is I graduated from undergrad with a degree in journalism. So nothing, at all in the teaching realm. I thought, oh, I'm going to be on the radio. I want to be like a broadcast journalist, stuff like that. And then a few years later, when that wasn't working out, I had a teacher friend, and she was a substitute teacher at the time, looking for a full-time job. And this is when I lived in Manhattan. And I was like, teaching, it's something I could do. I love kids. I have a lot of energy. I'm creative. I'm looking for something that's not monotonous or the same every day. And then, of course, I was like, the schedule sounds great. Like summer's off, So I thought, all right, I'm going to go to grad school for education. And so went to grad school in Manhattan, graduated with my degree in elementary ed, which was not, looking back, I'm like, I always wanted to be a middle school teacher, which is what I ended up being. So I have no idea why I went into elementary ed, except for I was in my mid-20s, and I think I just thought there wouldn't have been enough of an age gap from my students to how old I was for them to take me seriously. So I think I was like, oh, I'll just start with the younger kids, and already I'm 20 years older than them, close to it. So I started teaching. I taught 5th grade in East Harlem, and it was a really rough year. It was like completely stereotypical, unfortunately, like fist fights every day. I called the security guard every day, but I was like, all right, I just took out a loan for grad school. I just graduated and I have to stick it through the first year. And so my first year was already kind of not the best entry into the teaching world. I was already like, I hate this. Mostly because of the environment. It just wasn't a supportive environment and there wasn't a lot of learning going on. It was a lot more just babysitting.
Interesting. Well,
And so
first year is challenging regardless of where you are,
yeah,
but that's, yeah, add that to it as well.
yeah,
That's tricky.
it was pretty terrible. And I'm grateful that I had a volunteer from the church who came in 3 times a week as a TA, and she was a lovely lady who really helped keep me sane and also helped just help me record incidents that happened in the time they happened at. So I had a good record of that. But
Wow.
after that first year, I actually moved to Florida, and I was in the West Palm Beach area, and I taught fourth and fifth grade there in a very different environment. Lots of support from the administration there, so it was a much better experience. And I was enjoying it. I was like, I was starting to feel good at what I was doing. I think with teaching, it takes a while or at least for me, it took a while for me to feel confident in knowing what I was doing, like, talking to parents. And, when I went down to Florida, we were emailing parents, which was very different. In New York, we didn't have computers. It was more old school in New York City. And so, just getting my flow on like, all right, how do I tell the parent the positive before I tell them the negative and things like that. And, discipline in the classroom and just kind of finding my groove. And that's when I was thinking, all right, I made a mistake and I should have just specialized in teaching middle school English. Like, that's what I want. I don't want to teach math and science and social studies. And so that was already spinning through my head. And luckily, my school I was teaching fifth grade the first 2 years. And then they were like, actually, we're going to try something. We're going to departmentalize and we're going to have reading and writing. The kids go to one teacher for reading and writing. And then in the second half of the day, they go to a different teacher for social studies, math, and science. And I was like, this is fantastic. So I had thought about leaving teaching because I was like, is this something I could see myself doing forever? But then when that opportunity, you know, showed itself, I was like, well, this puts me down the track of specializing in the subjects I want.
Yeah. Nice.
I back the journalism from my undergrad with, I'm passionate about writing and reading. And so I was like, all right, I'll stick around. And so for the next 2 years, I taught just reading and writing to fourth graders. And I loved just reading and writing. I was like, I could focus on what I want to focus on. You definitely, when you specialize, you definitely get the kids who, might not love your subject. So you are stuck with, when you're teaching a gen ed class, maybe for an hour of the day, they're not into it. And so that was a little challenging, but I liked it. And then toward the end of that fifth year of teaching, so 1 year in New York City, 4 in Florida, actually probably by the end of my third year in Florida, I would say, I was like, maybe I need to do something else. Like, this is great, but I don't see this as a forever. Mostly because I worked so hard and I was still broke. I was like, I'm working this hard and I'm still worried about money. Um, and that was probably the bigger driving factor. And secondly, I just thought, I don't know that I could do the same thing for the rest of my life. And teaching, well, you can switch grade levels and you could switch subjects. Each year is kind of a repeat in some way.
Groundhog's Day. I remember feeling
Yeah,
like, oh man, I've said this so many times. Can I just like
yeah,
record myself and automate, you
yeah.
know?
Like I remember saying this last year in the same way. And you do get to change some of your lessons and things like that. But so I had it in my head that I was like, I hate Florida. I'm leaving Florida. And I don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to get a job in sales because somebody told me I would be a good person to be in sales. And I remember I like went to the bookstore and bought books about how to be a salesperson. And I was like, I don't know if that's me either, but we'll see. And I actually resigned from my teaching job in Florida with no job lined up and with a ticket to move to Chicago. And I was like, I'm going and I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to leave teaching and I'll figure it out. And The second to last day of school, I started to socialize that with, the parents. And there was one parent in particular who was like, "Oh my gosh, like, you mean you're not going to have my younger son in 2 years? Where are you going?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll figure it out." And she actually was like, "Wait a minute. My coworker has a son who's a principal or assistant principal at a middle school in Chicago. Let me connect you." And because the world and the universe works in mysterious ways, I connected with him the next day, and he's like, "We have a seventh and eighth grade English teaching position open,
Wow.
and I can get you in." And so I was like, "Well, I guess if I'm going to become a middle school English teacher, then I'm not leaving teaching." So again, it was
Mm.
like all of the things I wanted in teaching kept falling into my lap, and that's what kept me in it. Like I was still thinking in my head, like, "Oh, this isn't for me," but the things that I wanted were falling into my lap. And so I interviewed, I got the position. It was in the out by O'Hare in Melrose Park in Illinois. And I moved to Chicago, and I was like, "This is awesome. Seventh and eighth grade English. This is what I've been wanting." And I really liked it. But I still felt like this is not something I see myself doing for forever. Like, you see other teachers who are more bitter, they've been there for 30 years, and you're at the curriculum meeting and you're just like, "Oh, negative." And it's really easy to get into that negative mindset around other people who are also stressed out, rightfully so. It's a stressful job. And so I
Yeah.
still had that going on in my head. I was like, "All right, I started an after school literary arts magazine. Like, I got to do all the things I wanted to do." And I was still like, this still doesn't feel like a forever thing. And I just kept pushing it. Like, so I taught there for 4 years. So in
Wow.
total, I taught for 9 years. And the last four really were, they were the years I loved the most, but they were also they're like kind of like magic years, because if I would have actually gone with my plan, I would have left teaching before that, those 4 years. And so I finally, I don't know what really pushed me, but I remember I was like seeing a therapist, and I was like, teaching is my identity. And that was a really scary thing, because I think all teachers probably can relate. Um, when you meet someone new and they go, "What do you do?" And you say, "Oh, I'm a teacher," instantly, regardless of if it's correct, they come up with this idea of who you are. And it's usually got a positive connotation to it. And I started to go, "Wait a minute. Like, I'm going to be leaving so much, and I'm leaving this big identity. And then what?" And so
Yeah.
I remember just, it was like, how long am I going to stand at this like cliff and not jump? Like, I've been saying this every year, and every year, you kind of get wrapped up. You can't quit in the middle of the school year. So you really have this one opportunity at the end of the school year to say, "Hey, am I going to quit, or am I going to do this again for another year?" And
Yeah.
so it just got to the point where I had told one of my close coworkers that I was going to resign at the end of the school year, and at least give myself the summer to look. And I had the feeling that it started to get around, and I was like, "Oh, I can't get to my principal before I get to my principal." And I was like, "Today I'm going to have to talk to him." And I was like, "I'm going to resign at the end of this year." And as I was saying it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm crazy."
Taking the step. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was like, "I'm gonna do it." And so I did. So I resigned. It was like, I finished the school year. All my students were like, "Are you gonna write a book? Are you moving back to New York?" They thought I was doing all these like grand things, and I was just thinking, "Gosh, I hope I could find a job."
Right? It's such a gutsy move. And even when you know it's the right thing to do, it's not necessarily easy.
It doesn't feel right.
Hmm.
Even, it doesn't feel right. And it's funny because right now, and I would say in the last 3 or 4 years of my life. So the first year out of teaching, I was, trying on different things, but now it feels right. Like, if I could tell myself back then, "Don't be so scared. It's going to work out." If you're thinking about leaving, then you're not happy. And another year doing the same thing probably isn't going to make a change. And so, I left, and I gave myself the summer to find a job, because I thought, "Hey, I get paid through the summer. I have health insurance for the summer. It's kind of like a built-in few months to look and not settle. 'Cause I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to leave a career of 9 years where I got a master's degree and a ton of loans for something that's going to make me not happy. And I will say it
I
was,
I just want to like, yeah, everything that you're saying. The fact that we, the fact that as teachers we were paid throughout the summer
yeah,
and insurance throughout the summer, like that is so fortunate for and to be able, sometimes I think it's just good to have like a time to relax and to kind of recoup. For some people that are extremely stressed by the end of it, sometimes
mhm,
what they need isn't to just jump into a different full-time job. Sometimes it's good to have a little bit of recoup time,
detox.
and
Yep.
sometimes great recoup comes from trying something different on and learning and growing through it. So,
It
yeah.
does, and you really, even if you're a teacher just for a year, I mean, I had done it for 9 years, so I came out of, my last school year going, "Wait, LinkedIn? I don't have a LinkedIn. I don't have connections. I don't have a resume." Um, so there was a lot of things that you kind of just need time to do. I would just go to the coffee shop and be like, "Okay, here are job titles that sound like things that I want to do." And I had this big notebook and it was like, here are job titles, here are keywords that I've noticed in their like, advertisements for the job postings. And now how am I going to craft a cover letter and a resume that like encapsulates all of that? And it was like a job. I would just go to the coffee shop in my neighborhood and do research on what I wanted to do. And I mean, it's pretty great that with teaching, I say build it in. You get all those vacation days like during the school year, try to revamp your resume earlier on. And
And
I
I'm
will,
just going to put in a little
yeah,
plug here for everyone that's listening. Um,
yeah,
I love that you have the personal initiative to do all of this by yourself, and that's a lot of work.
it
And it
is.
can feel like kind of like such a shot in the dark when it's like, well, I don't know about LinkedIn, I don't know about resumes, I don't know about a cover letter, like, and and how do I translate those things into like corporate language instead of
Yep.
educator language? And so for everyone listening that's like, that sounds overwhelming, I don't know how to take those next steps, those people want to sign up for a course that we have called Find Your Next Dream Job, and it helps them identify what they want to do and then go through the steps of everything that you're taking. Of everything that you're talking about, that's just really impressive. I love hearing the methodical process that you
Yeah,
tackled all of
no.
that by
Well,
yourself
well,
through.
and that's what there wasn't a community, right? There was nowhere to go. I did some Google searches for like leaving teaching, what next? And there were maybe, there were a couple abandoned blogs and there was really nothing out there. I mean, there was just a couple of posts out there saying similar things, but no one who'd been through it who could basically say, no, this is how to get to where you need to be. And it's okay if you have to take a few steps back. And I will say, there were tons of rejections when I was applying for jobs. Everyone was like, oh, but you were, quote unquote, just a teacher. And in my mind, I'm like, that means I could do everything. Are you kidding?
Exactly. I kind of means I'm like superwoman. So
Exactly.
yeah.
That means I'm going to work hard. I'm going to take it home. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to manage this. I'm going to put on a show. I'm going to communicate with parents, all while disciplining and transferring knowledge. And so I thought it was an asset, but it definitely, a lot of companies they were like, yeah, but you don't have corporate experience. And at the time I was, I didn't know the best way to spin my teaching experience as corporate. And, now that I'm an instructional designer and I've worked in the corporate world for 5 years now, I'm like, if you could teach, you could do anything in the corporate world. You just have to spin it the right way and kind of like, you know, show people that you've done it all. You've done it with probably 30 different people, 30 kids, but they're still people.
Yeah.
Um, and that, they can take a chance on you. And so I ended up through a connection getting a job at one of the big four accounting firms, which was totally not in my, at all in what I thought I would be ending up doing. And I got a recruiting job. So just kind of like, I just was like, you know what, let me dip my toes into the corporate world and see what's out there. And it took about a year and a half of being in the corporate world, doing stuff I didn't like for me to go, wait, learning and development is my passion. I'm good at it and I like it. And I just want to do it not in a public school setting. And so I applied for a training manager position at my last company, and I was not qualified for a manager job, but I was like, I'm going to go for it. and they interviewed me and they were like, hey, we decided to not hire a manager, but would you want to come on board as a trainer? And I was like, sure.
Yes.
And yeah, and I started, this is the job that I just left, actually. I've been in a new job for 3 weeks. So I started as a trainer, which was literally like being a teacher, except getting on a plane and going to fly places and training adults, which are just like students. They're bored. They get tired, they look sleepy, and they don't learn, by lecturing. And these are the kind of things that I noticed my training team already had in place. It was just like death by PowerPoint. So it was just these like training sessions that were 120 slides, 5 hours. And I was like, whoa, 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 this is not how
Wow.
people learn. And I think that's when I realized, wait, instructional design is a thing. And it's a thing I'm passionate about. And it was something that you don't even realize you do as a teacher. You don't realize that you're planning your lessons by thinking about the best way to get that information across to your learners, who are students, without boring them, without giving them too much information, giving them, with assessing them along the way. And all of that stuff is applicable in any learning environment. And that's when I was like, it kind of clicked. Hey, maybe this is what I like the best. It's not the delivery, it's the behind the delivery, like how to deliver it. And yeah, that's kind of how the journey into instructional design happened. It was just like naturally, I thought, wait, I've been doing that along with every other teaching thing. Um, Now let me just focus on that. And I was really fortunate to have a lot of support from my team where they were like, oh, wow, we do need to redesign this. And if you want to take it on, we'll make that position for you. And
That's amazing. I
yeah,
love it. I love how like organically that came about. And I love that you
yeah,
have training experience. I loved doing
yeah,
training stuff also, but it was nice, to kind of get to that point and be like, we can improve this. This can be a lot better than it is. And
yes,
not all trainers, especially if they don't have an educator background, have the insights into here's how
yep,
we can make this more engaging and effective. And yeah,
absolutely.
and I love how you mentioned these are the things about teaching that I love. It's not necessarily just the delivery of it, but it's just the things that I love. It doesn't involve recess duty in the snow,
Yep,
lunch count,
yep,
behavior management. It
yep,
just anyway, I love
yeah.
it really. If educators knew how much it builds on, how much it needs
Mhm.
their educator experience, like, oh,
Oh,
anyway, it's
yeah.
great.
And there's a lot, even when I think about, so I started and I was working for a healthcare firm. So I was creating training for software used in hospitals by registrars. So, you go to your hospital, you go to the emergency room and, you're at the check-in window and the registrar is like, hey, I need your this, that, and the other. What are you here for? They're using a software and they need to be trained on how to use that software. And so, it was definitely a totally new industry for me. But once I started to play around with, okay, like, how can we make this more hands on? How can we check learning knowledge? Like, what did I do in the classroom? How could I do that with adults? People are people, And I then started to become the instructional designer over more product lines. And that's when I started to dabble a little more into like program design, which is again, things you do in teaching. You just don't call it program design. You call it like, we're creating a thematic unit on argumentative writing. But what are you doing? You're creating a program on argumentative writing. And so,
Yeah.
again, a lot of the things that you do in the classroom are exactly what you do in a learning and development role in any business, really. And I think that's the best part about it. I mean, I'm definitely at a place where I have not yet, you know worked as an instructional designer for a product that I'm super passionate about, but I've still felt fulfilled because I've been able to be creative and I've been able to watch things come together, like, start with nothing. And then all of a sudden I have this training program I created, and that's really fulfilling for me. And that's something I didn't know was fulfilling to me when I was in the classroom. I was doing it, but I think because I was like, behind the guise of like, I'm a teacher and I'm a role model and I'm a mentor and I'm a nurse and I'm all these other things, I didn't even get to realize that, oh, it's these little creative moments that really make me feel good. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, important. And that really helped me figure out, like, okay, what do I want to do next? And that's the great part about not being in the classroom, is there is a next. In the classroom, you're more limited, right? Your next is administration. Am I going to, become the AP or the principal? Do I want to go into something with, like, you know, data and looking at test scores and things like that? There really isn't a lot of room for growth outside the four walls of your classroom. But there's a lot outside, because there's a different industry, a different company, or a different role within learning and development. So I've found that, there's a lot of opportunity. The pay is way better. And it's, you know, I think one of the biggest things for me with teaching, I love to travel and I love having time off. And, even though it seems a little shallow, it's like, oh, I'm going to miss summers off. But you don't really need summers off when you're just not as stressed throughout the year. Like, you really don't. And a lot of jobs now, my last job offered unlimited PTO. So it was just, you tell them when you need it, and as long as it's not a busy time, you can take it off. My
And
current job,
I'm just going to throw out there, in case
yeah,
anyone hearing this doesn't know the acronym, it's just paid time off.
take time
So
off.
yeah, tell them how that works. Like, can you explain how can a person
Yeah,
have unlimited paid time off when they
yeah.
have a
So
job?
I started at my company with, I think, 26 days of paid time off, which is a great amount of time. And of course, depending on the company, some companies kind of shy away from you, like, taking all of your days. But for the most part, you could find a company out there that really, values work-life balance and wants you to take those days off. And so typically, you email your boss and you're like, hey, I need these days off. Can I have them? And as long as, you're not, slacking at work, they're usually like, yes. And my company, one of the big trends now is moving toward unlimited time off, basically saying, hey, we don't want you, you don't have to track how many days you have off. We just want you to take it off when you need it. And it's funny because you end up taking less time off when you have all that freedom. And my current company, still, we don't have unlimited time off, but I think it's 3 weeks off. They're closed during Christmas, plus another 2 weeks of personal time. So, like,
Cool.
if the time off is holding you back, there are jobs out there that work with that. Not to mention, I work from home, and home is wherever I want it to be. So, today I'm sitting in Philadelphia. In 2 weeks, I'll be sitting at my parents' house in Florida, and I won't be taking time off. And to me, that is the work-life balance that I need. And it helped me fill the void of, oh wow, I'm not going to have 2 months off, because I
Yeah.
really liked that summer.
Yeah.
So
It can
there
feel like
is,
giving up a lot. But I love how you
yeah,
also mentioned, some of the perks that you experience of feeling creative at work. And I remember, similar to what you were explaining, like, not just identity as a teacher, but, well, I work with people, I work with students, I work with, like, molding character and things like that. I think a lot of teachers can feel like, wait, I'm abandoning all these things. I'm giving up on this, like, good role person, whatever I was, like, and am I quitting being, like, good? There's just a lot
yeah,
of identity crisis sometimes in it. But I think if people could know, like, it's not like you have coworkers that you're interacting with personally. You have thousands of people that you're influencing through, with instructional design, with the materials that you're creating and the learning experiences, and they're going to be more enjoyable and make a difference in their life and in their
yeah.
well-being through what you're making. Like, there's so much benefit to what you're doing, influence.
There there is, and everyone out there, I kind of joke when someone, because you say instructional designer, and if you're not from a world of learning and development, a lot of people don't know what that means, right? Like, my friends are like, so what does that exactly mean? And I'm like, well, it's, if when you start a new job and you take a lot of boring trainings, it's my job to make those trainings not boring. That's kind of how I spin it. And so you are really, influencing people's attitudes towards learning and work. And I think, I still struggle with the whole identity thing. I will say, when people ask, you meet a new person and they're like, first question, what do you do? And I always still say, but I was a teacher for 9 years. Like, it's still taking time for me to not add that teaching part to it. Um, However, I will say, there are places to volunteer with children. So I think the other thing to remember is there are ways to still be that influencer and role model for children outside of the classroom. I have a friend who has been volunteering at a church in Chicago. She does tutoring with the same kid for the last, I don't know, 6 years. She's watched her grow. I tutored and helped kids write their college essays at a nonprofit writing center in Chicago. So there are plenty of places to volunteer if you feel like you still want to have that part of your life fulfilled. Um, it's different obviously than being in the classroom, but it feels good in a way too, because you're not doing it because it's your job. You're doing it because you're like, I want to do this. And so there is a way to still incorporate that into your life. Not to mention a lot of corporations and smaller businesses too are really big into giving you a day off for volunteering, or committees where you can, do community activities with children and things like that. So I think that there's a lot of ways to still keep that in your life. Um, but the bigger thing is figuring out, for me at least, was figuring out like what is something I can do forever. And I actually can confidently say that like I could do this instructional design and development forever, because there's a lot of different industries for me to do it in. If I get bored of one, I can move to a different one. And then it's a whole, I just started a new job 3 weeks ago, and now I'm not in healthcare anymore. I'm in software, working for a division at Dell. And so this is all, now I'm creating training for software developers, which is like a whole new world for me because I don't know anything about software development. So I get to learn also. And it's kind of nice like that too. When you're a teacher, you kind of don't learn a lot anymore, because you might learn some new like teaching, philosophies and theories, but for the most part, they just got recycled. Um,
Mhm.
and so you do also get to be a lifelong learner. You learn in whatever industry you're going into, and if that's fulfilling to me as well.
Yeah.
And so that's another nod toward being outside of the school that I think is valuable for
Yeah,
sure.
in the instructional design field, absolutely. Like for me in the classroom, I definitely felt very stagnant. Not the first 5 years. I was
Yeah.
growing a lot, and I did grad school in that too. Like
Hmm.
so much growth and so much development, but then I started to plateau and I wasn't comfortable with that. And I was still attending conferences and presenting at conferences and
Yeah.
learning a lot of ed tech stuff and
Yeah.
implementing things and helping other people in my district and so many things like that. But I just needed to grow. And instructional design, like, oh, there's so much you can always keep learning. I think the real thing to go back to, because I know it can feel like, well, how am I still like serving in the community? Or I love that you mentioned all those things. I think really when we look at, part of the goal with work is finding a role, an environment, a position, a way that you personally can thrive.
Hmm.
It's not just
Absolutely.
like have a job, or have a job that has street cred of what people look at as like, oh, you're a teacher, like check
Yeah.
mark in like
Praise
the
you.
good
Yeah.
person box. Yes,
Exactly.
I love that you found something that you feel like you personally thrive in, not just now, but looking into your future. I
Yeah.
know that you are going to share some things with us for the people that are enrolled in our instructional
Yes.
design course. Can you give us just a sneak peek
Yeah.
at some of the like
Yeah.
overall things that you'll be sharing with those
Yeah,
in the course?
absolutely. So the cool thing about working in instructional design and development, and a lot of companies I found really lump it together, right? Someone designs like what is the curriculum going to actually look like, and then someone else, depending on how large your company is, might actually do the development work. Like they're going to make the workbook or put it in a program to make it pretty. And at my last job, I did all of it, and so I got to learn a lot of different types of software. And there's a big push for micro learning right now. And so like, creating training that's like small, chunked up and easily digestible. So like 2 minutes, 3 minutes long on a single topic. And I found, through experimenting that the best way to reach that is via video and making videos. And there's this one program that I had the opportunity to use at my previous job called Beyond. It was formerly Go Animate. And it's so easy to use. And it's just an easy way. You can create animations, explainer videos. And so it's a great, easy way to create learning. Um, that's not just words on a piece of paper, in Microsoft Word. And so again, more opportunities for you to learn as a person in a new job. And I'm going to share just quickly how you could easily make something in Beyond with no real experience in developing or animation or anything like that. And I actually, at my previous company, I couldn't share any of my instructional design work, which was hard because I needed a portfolio and everything was proprietary. And so I shared with you, and we can share. I made a little digital portfolio about myself. That way, I could showcase my work, and I think that it was definitely beneficial for me. And I would encourage other people out there as well. Like if you could somehow showcase your skills in the way you market yourself for jobs, you're selling it already. And so yeah, so Beyond I'm going to show a little animation on just how easy it is to use. And that way, I think it's scary, right? Because you go into a new world and you have to learn all these new programs. And it's kind of fun though. Like, you
Yeah.
get to learn new programs. And
Yeah.
then you're like, wait, I made this and it wasn't even that difficult.
It's
So
like, I've got mad skills. Like, look at these. And I
exactly.
loved seeing your videos. So I'm so excited to share that with,
Thanks.
yeah, with
Yeah.
everyone that's in the course. So,
Cool.
as far as kind of last things, you've shared so much, of so much value of what your experience was like and, some tips along the way. But is there any last encouragement or tips that you'd give for transitioning teachers, people that are starting to feel like maybe I need to be doing something else, or I know I need to be doing something else, but I don't even know where to start? Like any advice that you'd give to
Yeah.
that?
I think the biggest thing is I would just do it. If you're thinking about doing it and it's not the first time you thought about doing it, it's not going to be the last. And it really slows down the trajectory of your career outside of teaching the longer you wait. Like I've waited, I spent a good 4 years teaching, knowing that I was probably not going to teach forever. And those 4 years, they could have been 4 years that I was pushing, more in my second career. And I think that you can't let the fear hold you back. You could easily, like you've posted a ton of posts on your Instagram about the types of jobs that are out there. I think looking at those posts that you've shared shows people that, hey, I have these skills. It's out there. I'm marketable. And just not being afraid to go out there and try it and do it. I mean, I know it's scary because you do leave the security of like this job and this career, especially if you've done it for years. But I also feel like typically if you're not happy, it's not a feeling that's going to go away. And so it's not going to go away unless you make it go away by trying something new. And I think that looking at some of the things that you've shared also, um, uh, I think the best, another piece of advice would be to brainstorm the things that you've done in your teaching role that you really like, down to the nitty gritty, like the little committees you're on. I was on the technology committee and the writing curriculum committee. And looking back, I'm like, oh, wait, that's where all of this instructional design started. And so, really digging into every little thing, besides standing up in front of the classroom, what do you do in planning? Writing objectives. That's all things that instructional designers do. We
Totally.
figure out what they need to learn. We create it into. I use Bloom's taxonomy now. I create measurable learning objectives, and then I figure out how we're going to reach those. And so, just by identifying all those things you do in your current job, it helps reinforce like I have these skills. They're just under the guise of teaching, but they can be under any other learning and development role in the corporate world. So
That's
just go
so
do it.
true. Just go do it. Yeah, especially if you've
Do
had the
it.
thoughts, and especially if those thoughts keep returning.
Mhm.
Your gut is
Yeah.
speaking to you. That's great.
Yes.
Okay, Felicia, thank you so much for sharing your experience in the classroom and beyond the classroom, and your tips for everyone. So yeah, if
Sounds great.
anyone is ready for more information or want to hear in more depth what Felicia has to share, it will be in the instructional design course. So Felicia, thank you so much for being on this
You
episode with
got
us.
it. Thank you for having me.
You bet.